So as I was saying, at St. Joe's, I continued reading Thomas Merton uh, uh, and other similar authors that primarily came out of the monastic, uh, uh, I would call mystical tradition of the Catholic Church. Uh, and I was meditating, and I had experiences that I would describe as mystical, that deepened my belief in uh, God. And I'm just going to call it the, the need, the necessity to continue to deepen my um, spiritual interior life. Um, I was drafted my my last semester of college, or second to last. I was drafted. I had a very, very low lottery number, and I had fallen behind my graduating class because I had to miss a semester because I was seriously ill. Um, Mononucleosis. Um, and the moment I fell behind my graduating class, I was drafted immediately. A very, very long story, very short. Um, I became a conscientious objector. It took me 4 months of reading everything I could possibly read about war and being a conscientious objector. And so, a very long story short, um, I had to go appear before my draft board. This is an absolute true story. I go, I had to defend my position, and I was taken into this completely dark room, completely dark, couldn't see anything. And then these lights came on, and there were interrogators behind those lights. I couldn't see them. And I was interrogated for an hour about my position, and it was very bizarre. I thought it was. And again, very long story short, I was denied um, by my draft board, and I I was given an induction date to show up to be inducted, and I just never showed up. I never went, and I waited. I think it was 4 or 5 years to go to prison. I thought that's what was going to happen, and I think it was approximately 5 years. I received a letter saying I was put in some other. I wasn't a country. It was. They just said I was put in another category, and that was the end of it. And so I never went to prison. And while I was waiting to go to prison, I returned to work at Allied Van Lines, where I worked there every summer. I paid for my entire college education. And, and during my time there, uh, I at some point, I don't remember when it was, it might have been when I found out I wasn't going to prison. I was accepted, I started going to night college at night at Northeastern University in Boston. I was, I got the position of a warehouse foreman, and when that happened, I didn't have to go out in the truck, so I got off at, 4 or 5 o'clock every day, and I could go to Northeastern at night. And I studied there labor relations. And I also had a very, I'm working in this warehouse, big warehouse. And during the winter, I'm like the only person working, so I'm unloading trucks by myself. I'm palletizing the furniture. But my point here is this: the warehouse became a monastery for me. I would go out in the warehouse and I would just meditate. Sometimes, I mean, it became a monastic way of life during the winter. And I'm going to tell you an absolute true story. It was in the during the winter, the moving business is very, very slow. So often I was the only person working. And as my fellow movers started working more and more full time towards spring, I can remember they were pulling out of what we called the yard, where all the trucks were. And the trucks were going out one by one, one by one. Uh, one of them stopped, and one of my fellow movers runs from the truck to me. I'm sitting on what we call the dock, and I'm just watching. I come in early, I get the trucks ready to go out, and I'm just watching the trucks leave the yard. And this young fella comes running over to me, and he says this, his exact words, I'll never forget this. And he says, Roger, I know what happened to you this winter. You found God in the warehouse. I mean, I swear to God. He probably doesn't have a high school degree. And he says that to me, and I have no idea what he saw or, you know. And he just runs back to the truck. And during the time I was the warehouse foreman, I had this experience of people coming to the warehouse, and just by their being, um, somehow really was like God was talking to me. In you know, just a couple of quick examples. A fella, he's moving back to the States from England. He was the CEO of a big international importer exporter of garments, and he and his wife are moving up to me. He resigned his position and was moving up to Vermont. And in the course of his furniture coming over from England, being in our warehouse, him coming in, going through some, we had conversation. And in the course of this conversation, I asked him at one point, why would you leave this position? You're, CEO of, and just very simply he says, well, um, my wife and I decided it wasn't worth it. All that, whatever it was, money, power, whatever, and we're moving up to Vermont, and we're gonna make vestments. We're gonna make vestments. And there were other people, and long list that just kept coming, and it was a very holy experience. Being in that warehouse. I mean, it was incredible. There were mornings on my way to the warehouse I cried because I remember this one morning driving to the warehouse to work and tears in my eyes, and I was begging God to no more messages. you know, just let me have a day of rest, okay? Don't send me any messages. I just want to do my work. Uh, so I eventually decided. Well, I wanted to get my college degree, and continuing at Northeastern was going to take me longer. I took every one of the courses in labor relations that I could possibly take. So when I looked into getting my degree from Northeast, it was going to take me longer from Northeastern than St. Joe's. St. Joe's, I communicated with them. I could get it in one semester. It'd be over. So I did. I went back to St. Joe's to finish in one semester. And while there, during that one semester, there was a Marianist. Marianists, they're like Jesuits. It's a Catholic religious order. One of the colleges they run is University of Dayton. I became friends with a Marianist. We started doing night prayer in the chapel after the library closed. I would meet him in the chapel, and we would do night prayer at St. Joe's. And he, on breaks, he would invite me to Dayton, to his little community with other brothers that he lived in. So, like on Easter break or long weekends, we would go back and live with his brothers at Bergamo in Dayton. And I fit in really good. They loved me. So after I graduated, they invited me to come live with them in Dayton, which I accepted the invitation, went to Dayton, lived there. And while I was living there, it was suggested to me by I think it was the treasurer of the province, the Marinas province. So why don't you apply for this? It was a job with the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, Social Action or Peace Office. And I did, and I ended up getting it. Dayton, geographically, is in the center of the Archdiocese. Uh, the Tower of Power, where the Archbishop is, and the Major is all in Cincinnati, but they had some offices in Dayton. And I was the associate director of the Social Action World Peace Office. We did a lot of things, but we dealt with social issues from apartheid in South Africa to boycotting Nestle's to we had an annual collection, campaign for human development. We used that money to fund, anti-poverty programs, and so I was kind of the church's mouthpiece on social issues in Dayton. I became very active in the community. I was president of the board of the Montgomery County Community Action Agency for like 5 years, and became very involved in the politics of the community. Met with the editorial board of the Dayton Daily News on a regular basis. Once in a while, the Archbishop would call me to kind of be a diplomat in the community when there were issues. And I also I was on a committee that helped begin the Marinas Volunteer Corps, modeled after the Jesuit volunteer. It was basically a program where people made a commitment to live in community, and they would work in food kitchens and halfway houses. So they made a commitment to work among the poor and to live in community for a year. And I helped start it. And I lived there for a number of years. I lived there. It was a big job getting that off the ground. A big part of my life at the time. And over this time in Dayton, a very, I guess it was a profound experience, I really had a very poor self-concept, didn't really like which I all hid very well. And, I went to bed, literally went to bed one night, just not liking myself very much. And waking up in the morning and realizing that many of my gifts actually had their origin in my struggles with my dealing with my disability. And because of my disability, I didn't. I had to become an observer. I wasn't a participant, and I became an observer of human beings, of people, and I developed a capacity for understanding, compassion, empathy, insight into just the human condition. And those gifts, I realized, came out of that brokenness. And it enabled me to help others out of empathy and compassion and understanding. So, the very things that I really hated about myself, out of it came good. Good that I used to help other people. It really was a transforming moment of my life. And during my time in Dayton, I met my wife Pam. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. We developed a spiritual life together. We went on annual retreats up to Guelph, Canada, to a Jesuit retreat center there. She was a good lady. She died very young. We were in our 40s. She died of pancreatic cancer. And even that whole experience, which happened over the course of a year, when they finally found out what the problem was, she had 3 months to live, and we just went on a great adventure. But even in that tragic loss of her life, there was a gift. Because it really, that whole experience taught me what's really important in life. So I kind of left that whole life behind me. I had been going to graduate school at the University of Dayton. I got a master's in clinical counseling. I left the archdiocese and became a therapist in community mental health. I became clinical director of several different agencies, and I got married the second time. That that marriage ended up in a divorce a few years before I retired, and that really sent me into a great depression. My father had become ill in Boston. I had a private practice at the time. I had left community mental health, started a private practice. I never intended to retire. And my father became ill. I went home to take care of him, which precipitated my closing my practice. And so there was a divorce, my father critically ill. I closed my practice, went home to help take care of my dad. And after his death, returned to Ohio. I was now living in Lebanon, and I just went into the most severe depression. It's hard to believe that it was me, and I was just stuck there, and I just hit it so well. And then I was able to meet Laura, and she also is the very best thing that has ever happened to me. We share many of the same loves. We love the land. We love growing, evolving, becoming more authentic, our true selves, however you can best say that. And I attribute a lot of my coming out of that depression to our relationship. And after another big part of my life was, and I look back on this, I don't know how I did it, but a stepdaughter my second marriage, there were children involved, and I they very long story short. Um, when my oldest granddaughter got married, I finished the basement so they could save money. Um, and buy a house. And when they did, they bought a house with several acres of land. This is a really long story, but it's a very important part of my personal story. Um, I was able to build greenhouses on that property, and I was able to grow organic vegetables and sell um, both flowers and vegetables at farmer markets. And I don't know how I was working like 24/7, but I don't remember it being like any major hardship. It was just like, uh, it was beautiful. Um, growing, I've been gardening like since I started with my father. Uh, growing tomatoes in the backyard. Um, nature, the earth, just a huge part of my spiritual life. Um, and being in a garden, planting that seed, cultivating that garden is for me a spiritual, it's part of my spiritual life. And I was blessed, I guess, having that experience of selling Rutgers tomatoes and flowers to people. To, it enriched my life, it enriched their life, and it became a huge part of my spiritual journey. I am currently, both Laura and I, are seeking to become uh, members of an, a spiritual, what I'm going to call a spiritual intentional community that has a strong connection to the earth and caring for it. Throughout my life, well, at least since college, I have thought about the benefits of uh, communal lifestyles. I have, for years, talked with people, wanted to take the tradition of, in the Catholic Church, people entering religious orders and sharing everything in common. Well, my concept was, you know, why doesn't everybody live that way? Um, it just makes more sense. Uh, and I think it can be a sign to the rest of the world of another way of being where we live out the gospel in community. Our lives that we live become the message to the rest of the world. And I think my whole life has brought me to this moment, and it is what I want to do with the rest of my life. It's the meaning and the purpose of my life right now to be a witness of living out the gospel in community.